Hello and welcome to our program. Preparations are in full swing on both sides of the border ahead of the third Inter-Korean Summit of the year, slated for September 18. On this week's A Road to Peace, we will discuss what the possible agendas are and what kind of preparations are being made. But before we move on, here's what this week's episode has for us.
On this week's A Road to Peace, we discuss the prospects for the highly anticipated Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang. We also take a look at North Korea's KCTV footage covering celebrations to mark the 70th anniversary of the regime's founding. Lastly, we meet with the unified Korean Dragon Boat team that won gold at the Asian Games.
For today's discussion, we're joined by Dr. Kim Chang-su, Research Fellow Emeritus at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Kim, a lot of international expectations are building up for the upcoming Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang. What would you say is the atmosphere is like surrounding the summit, and do you think it'll be successful?
The atmosphere for surrounding the upcoming Inter-Korean Summit meeting in Pyongyang is very positive. And there's almost a euphoria in the air that we are going to finally have another meeting in Pyongyang, which is pretty good. For very specific reasons, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why this time it will be another success. Because the 2 presidents made it very clear in their Pyeongyang denuclearization, they're going to return visit sometime within this year. So this is implementation of that pledge. The second one is recently Kim Jong-un and also Mr. Trump made it very clear Mr. Moon Jae-in should play a very important, very positive mediator role between the 2 countries, North Korea and the United States. So the third one is for very domestic reasons, both in South Korea and North Korea, because we are also fearing some serious economic problems in the South. And North Korea also has a tremendous economic problem, even though at surface, the life looks a little bit better off than before. But there's all kind of indications. Their indication is also staggering and declining. So that's why Mr. Kim Jong-un is really trying to improve its economy again. So there are very good reasons why this time it will be another success.
Definitely, hopes are high. And also, there's a lot of positive momentum going on, especially as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un recently sent a letter to President Donald Trump. And the White House described it as very warm and very positive. Do you think this will be a very positive sign for the possible Inter-Korean, maybe the North Korea-US summit and also the upcoming summit in Pyongyang?
Yeah, I think so, because this is a very good, long-awaited personal letter from Kim Jong-un to President Trump, because they have some problems. And there are a lot of concerns that they might go awry. I mean, there are some problems inherent in their relationship. But with this special letter to President Trump, they believe this accepted as a very positive sign that North Korea is willing to fulfill its promises, particularly on denuclearization. And
the success of the Inter-Korean talks will likely affect the upcoming possible North Korea-US summit as well in Washington.
Definitely.
Because they've been wanting some progress in denuclearization as well.
Yeah, there's a clear connection between the 2 summit meetings. One in between Inter-Korean summit meeting and another one, the second U.S. DPRK meeting. So the focus has been always on how we're going to implement the DPRK on the North Korean side. If North Korea comes up with a clear, even if it is a partial list of their nuclear arsenal, and their willingness to implement all these nuclear facilities and the process of what's called FFVD, which has become a recent kind of buzzword for from a kind of CVID. But as long as it's a comprehensive denuclearization, and they made a pledge again, and if they did show some concrete roadmap to reaching that point over the next 2 or 3 years, or at least within the President Trump's first presidency. So I think if North Korea makes more efforts to make this kind of things happen, transparent, then there are good reasons why Washington will accept this as a very positive sign, and they're trying to implement it's another summit meeting very positively. So this is a good, tremendous momentum and very positive sign for North Korea to moving on to the next summit meeting with Mr. Trump.
But while there are positive signs in Washington, there are also concerns that saying that the improvement in inter-Korean relations should come side by side with progress in denuclearization, but that's not happening at the moment. Where exactly does South Korea stand in all this, and would it affect the alliance with the United States as well?
I think these concerns are, it's not too far-fetched, I believe, personally, because there's a legitimate concern, not only in the United States, but also in South Korea as well. There are a majority of the experts are questioning the validity of Mr. Kim's pledge to implement the denuclearization. But the problem is always the timing and the details, because they have not submitted any specific list of nuclear arsenal, and the order of this kind of implementing or dismantling all these nuclear facilities. So that's why these people are concerned. I think this is a legitimate concern, but I think this would give this kind of concerns, both South Seoul and Washington, and also Pyongyang will make their best efforts to show that they really mean business, and they're going to implement all these pledges one by one, simultaneously, because this is not a problem of priority. This should go all together at the same time. So we have to see, and maybe we need some more patience.
And hopefully maybe North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will bring something huge to the Inter-Korean Summit so that President Moon can bring it to the UN General Assembly and announce it to the international community as well.
I hope so. If you go with a kind of partial list of kind of implementation of denuclearization, or partial list, or it's, action speaks louder than a word. So it'll be the actions that is pretty much needed at this time, not just repetition of the words that have been said all over again.
Now, another important factor would be an improvement in U.S.-China relations. That should also be an important influence for the Inter-Korean talks. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's very important, increasingly important in our relations with North Korea and implementing denuclearization on the North Korean part. Because I think it's quite legitimate that Mr. Trump has come up with a kind of concern and worry that it is behind Pyongyang. There's been always Beijing. And Beijing trying to keep North Korea in their fold because they don't want North Korea free from their influence and trying to do something out of their control. So as long as Beijing really wants North Korea to be in the sphere of influence, which meaning that the maintenance of its regime, the stability of this part of the world. So to the best of the national interests of China and North Korea, China definitely will continue to play a very important role, which is not actually bad for South Korea and the United States as well. This is my personal opinion. But again, as long as United States and China, aggravates what they call not just a trade war, according to the Chinese experts, the China trade dispute, which amounting almost $250 on China's imports. So it definitely have a tremendous impact on even the implementation of this kind of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Definitely no question about that. It is not just China, but also Russia wants to play an important role. So as you see, we have the Far Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok again, and the two leaders of China and the Russian Federation made it very clear they're going to keep very clear alliance against the Western powers because this is their region, this is part of the region, and they want to make clear that the Korean Peninsula remain nuclear free, but also North Korea the regime should be kept stable. So that's why Chinese and the Russians as well will want to play a very important role, just like U.S., Koreans, Japanese leaders want to do that. So this is a very complicated game, but we have to wait and see. And so this requires very all kind of patience on our part, not only on the South Korean part, but also on the parts of all regional powers.
Right, all 6 parties related
That's
to the
right.
nuclear talks. I see. Now, moving on September 9th, North Korea celebrated the 70th anniversary of its founding with a military parade and the mass games. Let's take a look.
선민주주의민공화국 상검 연돌경축 일병식에 이어 평양시 군중시위가 시작됐습니다. 제조선의 새로운 공성 번영기를 펼쳐가시는 평양은 최고領導자 김정은 동지께 최대의 영광을 삼가드리고 있습니다.
Now, what first caught my attention was how high-tech the mass games were. I mean, the scale is enormous, and we expected a lot of great performances. But did you see all the drone performances and also the laser shows that they put off for these celebrations?
Yeah, I was a little surprised because this is much better off, much highly advanced performance than compared to any previous.
Yes, 5 years ago.
Because
definitely.
Mr. Kim Jong-un himself learned a lot when he visited Pyeongyang and also Singapore. So one of the best way to propagate is using the high-tech media for all kind of facility. So that's exactly why they chose this kind of very high-tech performance this time, rather than just employing tens of thousands of fans. So this is highly advanced and highly kind of provocative, not less provocative, but it's much more sending a strong message to South Korea and also to the outside world as well. So it is a very good decision to go this high-tech performance rather than relying on the same old style of performance.
Right. Speaking of sending of a message to the international community, it showed a lot of scenes from the Panmunjom summit in April 27, and also it shows the two leaders of the two Koreas shaking hands and signing the declaration. What do you make of this? What kind of message was Kim Jong-un trying to give to the world? I
think this is a well-designed, well-schemed performance because they really want to go on with what they achieved at the Panmunjom on April 27th. And one week from today, we are going to have another meeting, a summit meeting in Pyeongyang again. So the message they were trying to deliver to the outside world, we are going to continue on the achievement we made at this Panmunjom summit meeting on April 27th. So this is there's no disconnection between these two. Clearly, they have worked so far for the last 5 or 6 months. They have done their best to make another successful summit meeting with Korea and leading to another successful meeting with Mr. Trump. So this is a very strong, a very clear message. They're willing to for a very successful meeting with both South Korea and the United States. That's why they intentionally toned down all the message to the outside world. Definitely. Otherwise, which has been very provocative to the outside world. This time it is very friendly, relatively friendly to the outside world, and they really sent a very different message compared to all the previous messages they have done. I mean, his father and his grandfather did.
Now, since the first Inter-Korean summit of the year in April, the two Koreas have actively engaged in exchanges across various fields, including sports. A unified Korean dragon boat team recently took home the first ever gold medal at an international sporting event. Let's take a look.
Cross-border sports exchanges have seen major progress since the historic Inter-Korean summit in April. South and North Korea once again fielded joint teams for the Jakarta Palembang Asian Games, months after the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Unified Korea picked up 4 medals at the 2018 Asian Games, finishing 28th on the medal table. The first medal news came from the Dragon Boat team. Dragon Boat racing is a team water sport involving 12 paddlers. The women's team won a bronze medal in the 200-meter race and a gold medal in the 500-meter race, the first ever gold for a unified Korean team at an international sporting event. The Korean unification flag was raised and the Korean folk song Arirang played at the victory ceremony, as the athletes stood on top of the podium and shed tears of joy.
저희가 될지도 안 될지도 몰랐던 남북 단일팀이 일단 돼서 그거에 처음에 이제 눈물이 나고 갑자기 없던 애국심도 생기더라고요. 아리랑을 들으니까. 그때 마음이 갑자기 가슴이 좀 울컥하더라고요.
아리랑이라는 의미를 갖고 계신 분들은 다 울음바다가 됐거든요. 근데 거기에 대해서 정말 함께 같이 그 노래를 부르면서 함께 했다는 것 자체가 너무 영광이었고.
The impressive feat by the women's team was followed by a bronze medal in the men's 1,000-meter race, which marked another new chapter in inter-Korean sports history.
남북 단일팀이라는 그런 또 상징적인 의미를 갖고 있는 거에 같이 함께할 수 있어서 상당히 개인적으로 되게 영광이고요. 나가는데 또 동메달이라는 또 성적을 또 할 수 있어서 너무 기분 좋죠.
The two Koreas agreed on June 28th to compete as one in 3 sports at the Asian Games, including dragon boat racing, rowing, and women's basketball. About a month later, on July 29th, North Korean athletes arrived in the South for joint training. With only 20 days to go until the Asian Games, the athletes were deeply concerned about the short period of time to make joint preparations for the event.
20일 정도의 짧은 기간에 이제 훈련을 하다 보니까 뭐 기술적인 면이나 뭐 이런 팀워크나 이런 게 전혀 맞지가 않았었어요. 그래서 그걸 처음부터 하나하나 맞춰가야 되는 게 굉장히 큰 애로사항이었죠.
One of the challenges was a notable gap in sports terminology. While South Korea relies on terms borrowed from English, North Korea uses terms translated into Korean. The South Korean paddlers ended up picking up the North Korean terms for better communication.
전문적인 용어나 이런 데서 부닥침이 좀 있었어요. 근데 북측 선수들은 저희가 뭐 흔히 쓰는 화이팅이란 말조차도 쓸 수 없으니까 그냥 대부분 저희가 맞춰가는 쪽으로 맞췄고요. 근데 처음에는 저희도 이제 생소한 단어들이 많았는데 맞추다 보니까 나중에는 굉장히 편하게 나오더라고요. 그냥 자연스럽게 그 말이.
Under the scorching summer sun, the athletes became one as they prepared themselves for the games through a demanding training schedule.
하루에 거의 10시간 넘게 훈련을 했어요. 하루 종일 20일 동안. 일요일도 안 쉬고 주말도 안 쉬고 계속. 그렇게 하면서 서로 또 믿음이 또 내가 보기엔 강했던 것 같아요. 서로 믿어주고 힘들어도 같이 으쌰으쌰 하면서 그래 하다 보니까는 생각지 못하게 좀 좋은 결과가 났던 게 아닌가 싶어요.
Their hard work and efforts finally paid off, with the team delivering an outstanding performance at the Asian Games. But they were soon faced with the tougher challenge of saying goodbye to each other. The South Korean athletes saw off their North Korean counterparts as they got on the bus. The captain of the women's team, Chang Hyun-jung, waved the unification flag at them in hopes of seeing them again in the near future.
꼭 다시 만나자는 사인을 서로 써줬거든요. 근데 북측 선수들이 이름을 다 해줬는데 뭔가 그거 펼치고 이제 우리 사인 했으니까 꼭 다시 만나자 하면서 인사 나눴는데 엄청 좀 슬펐던 것 같아요.
The next step for a unified Korea is the Tokyo Olympic Games in 2020. South Korea has already proposed North Korea join forces again for the Olympics. The Dragon Boat team demonstrated firsthand that a unified Korea is stronger than a split one. How did the South Korean paddlers find the whole experience?
단일팀 우리는 하나였다. 그냥 그게 맞는 것 같아요. 그 순간 우리는 하나였던 것 같아요.
역사의 한 페이지를 저희가 남긴 거잖아요. 그런 걸 봤을 때는 단일팀은 역사다?
첫 번째는 저한테는 물음표였습니다. 될까? 근데 다음에 온 건 느낌표였고요. 아, 마지막엔 마침표였습니다. 된다라는 마침표.
From Pyeongchang to Jakarta, efforts to boost sports exchanges between the two Koreas are beginning to bear fruit. We look forward to the momentum the upcoming Inter-Korean Summit will bring to future exchanges.
It's clear how much hard work and dedication these athletes put into the games, and it's really evident to see how powerful a unified Korean team can be in sports and also other fields.
I agree with that because it's just a start, and they form a very small group, as a matter of fact, compared to other games. And the records, the medals they earned is pretty much important. It is just one. If you look at the Dragon Boat race, the Chinese and Southeast Asian countries are very good at these games, but South Korean boat
they were
people,
no match.
They're no match, but they did much better than we expected, and that's a good sign that if we united and if we make one unified team, North and South Korea, we will do better in any Asian Games or Olympic Games in the future. So this is a clear sign that once we united with the easy stuff, which is sports, rather than denuclearization or very military stuff is very difficult and it will take a lot of time. But if we start with a less difficult and easier stuff like sports events and cultural events, we will do better and we'll continue to shape up a very favorable atmosphere for a summit meeting between Pyongyang and Seoul and also between Pyongyang and Washington. So this is a clear message, very kind of emotional, but also it has a tremendous influence
Now, another area that the two Koreas need to put their heads together in is economic cooperation. And it's we hear that a business delegation from South Korea could accompany South Korean President Moon Jae-in to Pyongyang, and the agenda is going to be highly discussed at the Inter-Korean summits. How important do you think is the economic cooperation as an agenda for the summit, and will they be able to draw out maybe a big roadmap for these cooperations during the three-day summit?
I think economic cooperation and economic growth on the part of North Korea is very important, because that's why they are willing to discard the nuclear weapons in return for getting some economic concessions, including economic cooperation from South Korea and the United States. So the economic situation is not so good in North Korea as you can imagine. That's why they have to get all the economic concessions, economic cooperation from South Korea. And we are willing to do that because we want to give North Korea some economic hands so that they can develop their own economy on their own, rather than just relying on the outside help, including South Korea's. So I think, so that's why, so going back to the delegation this time, Mr. Moon, we're going to take a delegation of many economic businessmen this time. Should be less than 200, but we are suggesting that maybe more than 100 businessmen will accompany him to Pyongyang, which is a sign that we are ready to help them with all the economic problems in the north and also in the south as well. So I think that's very clear. It's no harm, and this is a very good step toward a much better relation between two Koreas and possibly with the United States as well. So starting with this kind of economic aid to North Korea, and also making a much more friendly relationship between the two Koreas, which will pay a kind of foundation to a better relations even in the military as well. So denuclearization finally. So North Korea wants to be a kind of guaranteed of its regime security, because North Korea is also concerned about its own regime security. Right. Because Mr. Kim Jong-un made a very important decision to open up and to go the path of denuclearization. But many people, I would guess, in North Korea are concerned about what if the North Korea sees a kind of instability, all kind of signs of instability in the process of going to denuclearization. So once the economic aid is coming from South Korea and all the outside information coming from outside the world to North Korea, so that will have a tremendous impact on the North Korean citizens as well. So how they are going to protect all these North Koreans from disappointing from what they heard in the past. So this is a very difficult question, as a matter of fact, for North Korean leadership to open up and to agree on the denuclearization.
That's definitely an important key factor that the world leaders need to keep in mind. So
that's right.
Then what specific areas of economic cooperation do you think will be discussed? Will it be mainly railways and roads?
You're going to kind of opening up a liaison office in the Kaesong Industrial Complex. This, we believe, the rationale for resuming this office again is to help our two Koreas to have a much better understanding of each other. And so once North Korea becomes much more confident of our economic growth, they are more willing to come to the negotiating table for denuclearization. So this is a very important first step to moving to the next step, which is a kind of opening up and finally denuclearization of North Korean military. So I think this is something that Washington can understand, even though they voiced some concerns and worries about going too fast, because there are still economic sanctions imposed on North Korea. So that's why I think we are probably in Washington have been talking about whether we can really resume any liaison office in North Korea. So this kind of coordination over the agenda and the steps and roadmap to the final FFVD, even though North Korea doesn't like it very much at this time. But once we made it very clear, and what do we mean by FFVD? So this is almost tantamount to the comprehensive denuclearization, as a matter of fact, even though they come up with a little bit different terminology this time. But basically, it's a comprehensive denuclearization. So I think if Pyongyang willing to show some evidence that they really mean that they're going to implement denuclearization, and this will be accepted as a very positive sign to a further betterment of our relationship between Pyongyang and Seoul, and also between Pyongyang and Washington.
And all the things we just talked about are probably going to clear up a little bit in the coming weeks.
I hope so.
Definitely.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kim, so much for sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now, one of the most memorable moments of the April 27th Inter-Korean Summit was President Moon and Kim Jong-un's first encounter at the military demarcation line, where Kim invited President Moon to step over to the Northern side. We look forward to seeing another groundbreaking moment at the summit in Pyeongyang. This is all we have for you today. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.